possible to turn the lights on me down just a little bit? Great, thank you. My name is Vanessa Gould, and I recently finished the film Between the Folds, which many of you have heard about here. It aired on PBS last month and has been on the festival circuit for about a year, and it's just kind of wrapping up now, and it's such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Mike for hosting all of us origamists here. It's been quite a thrill, and equally a thrill to sit on so many other amazing talks. The end of Eric and Marty's thing I had never seen before, and it literally gave me the chills. So it's hard to follow, but it was a pleasure to hear that music before I went on stage. So rather than paraphrasing the film, which was kind of my first instinct, people suggested that perhaps instead I should tell something personal. And so that's what I've chosen to at least start out with. And they're both about transformation, so it perhaps makes some sense. I think the key point is that I absolutely never set out to be a documentary filmmaker. It was an accident, but perhaps an accident that was a long time in the making. For a long time as a young person and into my teen years, I thought I was going to be a pianist. Music is really my greatest love and really still is. But as I got better, I got really shy about playing in front of people. I felt this kind of vulnerability and this kind of window into my soul that just was too much of a handicap. So that became a hobby, and I went to college, and probably within a week, I actually decided that I wanted to become an astronaut. So I remember running up the stairs of Lowe Library at Columbia to research NASA, and took the requisite astronomy and astrophysics courses, and actually for 2 summers I worked as part of a team that worked on the predecessor to what Katie spoke about, the Chandra X-ray satellite, something called the Roentgen satellite, or the ROSAT. And enjoyed that, but I came back to college, I think one of those years, and fell madly in love, and decided at that point that empiricism be damned, I want to become a poet. So that lasted for maybe a couple of weeks or something like that. And at that point, it was all downhill. After that, I think there was music theory in there and art history. Math, for sure, was a big part for a while, and philosophy. And kind of the more embroiled in this confusion I got, the stronger I would have these moments of this unbelievable inspiration in certain things. So obviously as a musician, that would be like Bach, that we learned about yesterday, and I think many people here understand. I would listen to Bach and feel something that I couldn't find in my academic work, but also the music of Scriabin and Brahms. Terry Riley was incredibly influential on me. Lamont Young, Marian Zazila. I started taking to painting and the paintings of Kandinsky and Hans Hofmann, the color of the Hans Hofmann work, and Ellsworth Kelly. Actually, I have synesthesia, not quite as severely as what you saw in the short film yesterday, but things with color and senses just kind of electrified me, and there was no applications for that. The poet Dylan Thomas was really incredible to me. That meter of his verse, like 2 lines could literally bring me to tears, and yet I had no way to apply this. So what became clear, and I don't know if I knew it at the time, but eventually, was that I was kind of gravitating to these measured, pattern-bounded things and ideas, but that had this great color and expressiveness and sensitivity to them. But of course, that didn't really take me very far in college. And I actually started becoming kind of a poor student, and I had a penchant for skipping class and kind of walking around New York City and just kind of taking in the life outside. And eventually ended up majoring in architecture, which I kind of rationalized was some sort of a right brain, left brain, form, function kind of exercise. But of course, that didn't really leave me with many vocational skills when I graduated from college. So I kind of just flipped around New York City for almost a decade and did everything from like cleaning houses to a stint on Wall Street, and went to business school for like 5.5 months and dropped out of that pretty quick. And when I turned 30, I decided that I really needed to figure my life out. So I had dinner with a good friend of mine, kind of an older and wiser friend, who said that I needed to find something that I was passionate about. And he suggested that I document it so that I found my own voice in that passion rather than just taking in everything. And so he said, "What have you been interested in lately?" And kind of by great chance, just earlier that day, I had been reading about a mathematician called Tom Hull, who was doing incredibly intricate, beautiful research in origami paper folding that had these incredible aesthetic results. And so in this kind of sassy way, I said back to my friend, "Well, I've been interested in origami lately," as if to say, of course, that's never going to happen. And he kind of just stared me down and said, go do this. So without any funding and really no personal wealth and no education in film, no contacts in the origami community, and certainly no contacts in the film world, I set out to make this film. And I worked on it for about 4 years, meeting some of the most incredible people that I could have ever hoped to meet, as Eric and Marty and Chris Palmer. And what I think, I took so much away from my relationships with them, but what I think one of the things that they showed me was that to understand paper folding was to understand many, many other things. And that's something that I'll never forget. So I think with that introduction, maybe we'll show the preview of the film.
The process of making is the point of it. This needs to be a kind of ballet.
If anybody can copy as you suppose an artist, it's not art.
There's no carving in wood or in stone or knots on a rug that are going to look anything near like what pleats do when they express a line.
Lots of people talk about the reality of say, an elephant in origami. You know, does it look real? Does it look like an elephant? But it's a piece of paper. You know, of course it can't look like an elephant.
I think at heart, one of the things that makes us human, that's both our strength and our weakness, is a need to change things. It's also the heart of the appeal of origami, exploring the surprising magic of just how far you can change that square only by folding.
What are the limits, the physical limits of this art form?
When you put in a crease in a piece of paper, you're essentially changing the memory in that piece.
Origami is just such a great way to get your hands dirty with math. You know, it becomes your laboratory for doing mathematics.
And whenever there's a need in the industry to take a flat sheet and somehow make it smaller, there is a potential for origami to have an application.
In science, this is the most creative you can be. We are artists whether we do science or whether we build sculpture.
Yeah, I'm good. No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I thought I would kind of wrap up. We're actually going to show one other clip from the film, but I tried to think of things that could transcend origami and paper folding that would be kind of meaningful to the group. And so I have 3 observations about the medium of paper. And the first is its incredible grace and simplicity. You have this single square with very few rules and very basic rules. And to an artist, that's an impressionable surface, and to a scientist, that's a proxy for a plane, a 2-dimensional plane in 3D. And to think of the possibilities with just those type of people using paper, it just astounds me. And that's not even to mention the fact that paper is the most, or one of the most abundant materials probably on Earth. And most human beings probably have a relationship with paper. And so it struck me as what a powerful medium for an art form, something like that simple could be. And the idea that the most elemental things or ideas can perhaps be the most universally accessible and relevant. Another thing that hit me while we were making the film was this incredible metaphor, perhaps, that we're all paper squares, and we're born this kind of tabula rasa idea of just a pure, clean square, and through our lives we have events and we have accidents and tears, but we become something, and at some point you decide to impose your own will on that thing to make it what it could potentially become. And that had so much relevance to the people in the film. I mean, none of them set out to ever become paper folders, I don't think, nor did I ever set out to make a documentary about paper folding. But you have these moments and accidents and experiences along the way that change you and make you sculpt your life in a way that you never may have ever expected it to happen. And that idea that we all come from the same place is just really powerful to me. I mean, there's the anecdote that when you go into an exhibit of paper folding, all of the pieces there remain a single square, and yet they're just configured differently. And I thought that was extremely powerful. And the last thing that I really learned through the film was about the magic of the process. And origami is this incredible art form where, in some ways, the process of making is equally important, if not more important, than what you get at the end. I mean, in some ways, origami is almost even defined by its process. When you tell somebody what it is, you explain how it's done. And so that magic and that creative spark that I could witness while I was watching these people fold was something that I then started to kind of gain through my own work in making the film. And I think so many people here who create things and make things or reinvent things all know that feeling where it's the creative process that makes you come back and do it again, not the end product. And in some ways, I actually have very little attachment to the finished film, but the process of making it is what I know is going to lead me to the next point in my life. So with that, I think we'll show one more clip from the film, and it does kind of hint a little bit on the idea of process. It's, actually, I'll give it a little bit of a preface, sorry. This is a folder in Tel Aviv, Israel. His name is Paul Jackson, and he's kind of the antidote to some of the more complex folders.
The One Crease started more than 20 years ago when one of my students at the college where I was teaching said to me that we're doing a lot of folding, but what can you do with one fold? So I said, well, nothing really. You just make one fold, but you need to make others, to progress the sequence, to make something worth having. But then I thought about it and just began to experiment a little bit and realized that actually you can do a lot with one fold. So normally when you're doing origami, you would just ignore this and pass on to other things. But if you now sort of break the fold in the middle, just pop, and then bring the two sides together, and then hold it, there you've got a shape that's very complicated, but I think quite interesting. And it's just one fold. You can play with this quite a lot to get all kinds of interesting shapes. And this is the lesson, I think, of One Crease, that you don't need to have a very strong knowledge of origami technique to be able to make something beautiful that you feel is in some way significant and interesting.
Perhaps a second lesson is just how freeing creative limits can sometimes be, like Picasso, who at times only painted with one color.
As origami people, most of them really don't like these, because again, what do you measure it against? Lots of people talk about the reality of say, an elephant in origami. Does it look real? Does it look like an elephant? but it's a piece of paper. You know, of course it can't look like an elephant, but people measure the detail, they measure the proportions to the real elephant to see if it's good or bad. And if it's got really, really long, spindly legs, it can't be a good elephant. If it's got huge, huge, huge ears or just 3 legs or something, it can't be a good elephant. That elephants with 4 legs are better than elephants with 3 legs. And this is not just a problem in origami, it's also a problem in painting, for example. You see a painting by sort of Mondrian or something, just coloured squares and black lines, and is that better than say, a painting of flowers? For many people it's not. And it's the same in origami, that they would prefer to see an origami elephant than an origami... I think paper has a problem. I think it's very passive. I think a lot of origami looks trivial because I think a lot of paper looks trivial. So the pleating came from a sort of discovery that I could make these pleated ribs. I just started playing, and one day, somehow, these began to emerge. But the problem with them was that they looked a bit weak when they were just ordinary paper. The process of making is the point of it. The object looks good if the process felt good. This needs to be a kind of ballet. And that's what I try to do with my work, to take it to an edge of something, because that's always where the interesting things happen.
Thank you. So that's really it for me. I just wanted to thank again Eric, Elias, Chris, Marty, and Sally Rosenthal also, who many of you know here, deserves an incredible thank you for helping this project get rescued when it was on its deathbed. So amazing, amazing person. Thank you so much.